Welcome to the Startup Leaders Show, where we learn lessons from leading startup founders and executives. I am your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guests for today, Trevor Smith, who is the president and CEO of Atomic 6, as well as Christian Carpenter, who is the COO at Atomic 6. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. It's so great to have you here. Maybe we can start by having you give a little bit of background on yourselves and Atomic 6.
Yeah, Christian, you want to go first and then I'll.
Sure. Christian Carpenter. I worked at NASA for 5 years on advanced propulsion, moved over to Aerojet Rocketdyne for about 10 years, worked on space architecture, NASA's Orion program, and a bunch of other neat projects. And then went to SpaceX for 5 years, developed Starlink, and ran about half of the production there for the V1.0 subsystems. And then I've been working in startups, most recently Atomic 6, and super excited about the stuff that we're working on and bringing composites to the next phase of maturity for these applications.
Lisa, are you still there? We can't see you.
I am. I just went to full screen for you guys so that everybody could see both of you a little bit easier.
Okay.
So don't worry, I'm still here.
Yeah. Well, he failed to mention he also helped design the propulsion system for Starlink, which is kind of a big deal too.
Yeah, so complete underachiever, I can tell.
Yeah. His resume and background are very different than mine. Co-founder of Atomic 6, got a degree in commercial real estate from the University of Mississippi. So direct line of sight for aerospace and defense startup. I was actually a commercial real estate broker here in Atlanta for 6 years, and got the composite bug, and we kicked it off in 2018. And we really wanted to solve high performance composites. How do we get high performance composites at a much faster rate, cheaper? And so we have a proprietary mold design. I call it the glorified muffin pan. So everybody knows what a muffin pan is. That's a mold. So we have a unique mold technology that allows us to pull more performance out of any given material. So Lisa, we'll talk about it in a minute, but we touch a lot of different verticals because we are agnostic to the raw inputs. So we can work with carbon fiber primarily, or Kevlar, or e-glass, or hypersonic materials. So we touch a lot of different arenas and applications, but we really focus on those environments that are extreme, demanding, harsh. So space and hypersonics tend to lead the way. So we started in 2018. My wife and I bootstrapped it for 3 years. I actually started a commercial LED lighting company the same day we started Atomic 6. So you could say I started a startup to fund my other startup. But that worked pretty well. And then we raised our first round in 2021, got our office space that we're sitting in here, and we did another round in 22. We are about to be 10 full-time employees. We've got 2 new coming on board in the next week or two. But we're here in Atlanta, Georgia, and Christian commutes in from Redmond, Washington about once a month.
Wow, amazing. So Christian, we are neighbors. So at least when you're in the Redmond area, we are. Well, great. That is an amazing background. And I'm really excited to talk with you guys today because you are doing some really, really exciting things. So maybe you can talk a little bit about some of the actual use cases for this really amazing composite technology that you're working on.
So I joke with my mom. I say the most boring thing we're working on is actually for an unmanned fighter jet, which is in the aeronautical arena. Everything else is hypersonics in space. But we, through the SBIR program that you're very familiar with, we've actually, I think, getting our 10th award now. 6 phase 2s, 5 phase 1s. That's 11. But anyway, we've built the center wing bulkhead for what's called a Group 5 unmanned combat aerial vehicle. So think about an F-35 without a pilot, working on that critical composite structure for that. We've got deployable solar array systems. So we're working with AFRL Space Vehicles Directorate. So if you've seen the ISS, the ROSA, Rollout Solar Array, that's what's used to power the ISS through those solar cells. We've got a deployable system that we are working on to actually demo, fully built by Atomic 6 at some point this summer. So the rollout mass, which are the booms, and then the solar array substrates, which is the back of the solar cells, and then a deployer mechanism. So we are looking forward to this summer demoing that complete solar, system fully built by Atomic Six, not the cells themselves, but we'll outsource that. And then we've got lots of hypersonic activity. So we are working with AFRL Materials Directorate out of Wright-Patt to develop a structure on a new hypersonic missile system, really showcasing the manufacturing techniques that we have that pull more performance out of those materials. That's under contract now, which is a phase 2. We've not publicly announced it because we don't have the contract, but we have got a tentative award notice for a direct to phase 2 to build the hypersonic radome for our neighbors down the street, which is Hermeus. They've got an aircraft called Dark Horse. They're planning to achieve hypersonic aircraft, commercial aircraft, and standing that up through DoD funding and research. So we're excited to build the radome on the hypersonic aircraft for Hermeus. And then the biggest news so far, still tentative award. We're waiting on the contract, some paperwork flying around, but we received our tactical funding increase, which TAC-5 for short. So phase 1, phase 2, TAC-5 would be the next logical step up. And that's with Space Systems Command. We call it space armor. So it is a new type of micrometeorite and orbital debris shield, right? So space debris is becoming a big problem, space sustainability. We've developed the lightest, thinnest, monolithic, so single piece shield that Space Force is aware of. So we are excited to continue developing that and hope to protect high value assets for the DoD on their, missions headed to LEO, MEO, and GEO.
Amazing. Okay, so I understand that you actually have a video of this space armor. So if you bring that up, we'll make it full screen so everybody can see what this actually looks like when
Yeah, so for some
an
background
impact happens, right? Is that's it, right?
Yeah, so for some background context, this is a 3 millimeter aluminum ball traveling at around Mach 21.5. So we tested this at Texas A&M University. They've got the hypervelocity test chamber there. It's a 2-stage light gas gun. So the projectile goes from 0 miles an hour to Mach 21 in about 16 feet, overcoming 1.3 million G-forces on its way up to hit our shield. So you can actually see in this freeze frame the buildup of heat in front of this projectile. So I'll go slowly so you can see it. At that point, there's an explosion of plasma. So very, very hot gases and heat coming off of that. And then you can see what happens with the rest of it. So what's cool about that, we found we actually shot a aluminum plate, so a non-composite plate. And so what we saw, totally unexpected, was the lack of additional debris creation post-impact with our shield space armor versus the picture at the top is an aluminum plate. You can see chunks of more metal coming out, creating even more space debris. So we're excited about that as well from a sustainability standpoint.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is incredible. Okay. So I don't think I've ever heard of another company doing this many amazing, really innovative, basically cool things, right? What is the secret to your success so far? I mean, it's amazing that you're involved in all of these really just like I said, very innovative opportunities. How's this coming about?
Sure. Well, if I spilled the secrets on air, I'm sure our investors would be very upset, as would I. But it's really the technology that's been developed from a first principles perspective of how to manipulate these materials in a high pressure environment. So we utilize what's called an autoclave. It's basically a big sort of oven that we can pressurize, and we use nitrogen, which is an inert gas, because if you used oxygen and there's a spark, it would be a bomb. So lots of pressure. And so on one of the autoclaves, we actually can reach pressures equivalent to about 2,000 feet below sea level. So we use the ideal gas law, PV equals nRT, to cure these parts under pressure and temperature. But in addition to the technology, you met Christian earlier, we have a rock star team. Our CTO is not here today, but he's spent 40 years in the composites industry. He's touched thousands of parts. On the hypersonic side, he helped build the thermal protection systems for the Rockwell X-30 NASP aerospace plane. So it's not me. I'm the front man, but really the heavy work gets done with the team we've been able to pull together.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so how did you actually go about pulling this team together? Where did you find people? How did you get them to join your mission?
So Pete, our CTO, he was our first outside hire. Went to a couple of trade shows. Word got around that I was asking some very unique questions around autoclaves. And so he was actually hired by, he still hasn't told me today, someone hired him to call me and find out what's going on with Atomic Six and what's this process. And so we met that way. And fast forward, a year or so, we got to know each other. And I was like, wow, this guy knows his stuff. I really need someone like that on my team. So Pete was the first one in the door. And when he finally saw the mold, the IP, he said, Trevor, this is what the industry's been missing. Like, I get it now. This makes sense, right? Like, this is what we've needed for the past 70 years to really improve performance on composite manufacturing. Um, so he kickstarted it off as our first employee. Christian came to us. We did some multiple SIBR submissions across some other startups he was working at. And we just found our way together after working, 2 years really trying to work collaboratively. And I said, man, we really could use an all-star COO. And here he is. So he's been a huge addition, and I like to brag. We do have investors, but I say the best money we actually could get on the cap table is employee money, right? So like every employee has a vested interest in the company, but after being here for about a month, Christian said, "Hey, is the round still open? Can I invest?" And I go, "Absolutely." Right? Like you've got this guy, NASA, Aerojet, SpaceX. He's seen so many aerospace companies, and then after looking under the hood for about a month, he goes, "I'm in." So I like to state that we have that as well. But it's really like a fun culture. We have a lot of fun around here. The things that we're making are not boring. Lots of fun test videos and experiments, and we celebrate the small and the big wins.
I'd
Excellent.
like to say that, like, making hardware that works and having a real application for it is super critical. There's a lot of startups around that are, making big waves about how much money they raised, or, they've got some idea, but they don't have really any proof behind it. They don't really have anything to show yet. And so what I found really interesting about Atomic Six is like there's the backup there. So you've got like real hardware. It really does what we want it to do. We're proving out the business case. We're proving out the technology, and that's super attractive, I think, to people who want to actually go get stuff done.
Absolutely. So, if you guys were, knowing what you've learned over the last few years as you've been pulling this together, is there anything that you would have done differently knowing what you know now?
I mean, yeah, Monday morning quarterback. Um, I I don't know. I feel like it all sort of fell into place. We raised our first round in the best funding environment possible, which was 2021. The stars continue to align for especially the employees and partners that we bring on. So I don't know that I would do much different. I feel like it's just sort of worked out really well. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I really like the story and how it's all come together.
I
Right,
think
right.
building more hardware sooner
Yeah,
is one of the that's definitely a big thing.
I would
Yeah.
change bringing Christian on sooner. That's what
Yeah.
I would change. I would want Christian on sooner.
Yeah.
That's great. So when you say more hardware sooner, what do you mean, Christian?
Yeah, so like one of the things that I think companies often struggle with is they wait too long before they start building hardware, and not just building any hardware, but like building hardware in the way that you would do it for production. So one of the tenets that I've learned that I try to put it anywhere that I am at, including what we're doing now at Atomic Six, is prototyping on the line. So historically, that hasn't really been, something that companies have allowed because they want to keep the R&D separate from production. But in doing that, you use R&D processes that maybe aren't transferable to scaling up in production. So what's really great about what we're doing at Atomic Six is there is no separate R&D, piece. We make when we cut fabric, we cut it on a production machine. When we use the autoclaves are all production autoclaves. So the processes you're using and the data you're getting are all the same thing you would see when you scale up. So that's super important towards really knowing that your process can scale up. that you're projecting the prices that you're or the costs that you're going to have in production. And so getting that data as early as possible and figuring out what's going to fail as soon as possible and fixing those things, I think is really critical. And a lot of companies just wait too long. They spend too long in the you know throw it together R&D phase, and they don't get to that. How are we really going to take this to production?
Ah, yes. That minimal viable product, right? And yeah, I get it. That's really good advice. I think a lot of times when we're starting something new like this, especially when you're doing something innovative that's never been done before, you run into these roadblocks along the way. What have you found is the best way to just get through those roadblocks that you inevitably run into?
Delusional optimism is the term I like to float around here. So that's one. But I think one of the very few skill sets that transferred over from real estate is, I call it incentive alignment, right? So like we might think something's great, but if there's not a market for it or a customer demand, right, it's not great, right? Like that's how you have to generate revenue. So I call it my SIBR playbook. But what we like to do with every SIBR submission is go out and find a prospective customer, not just sign like a letter of support. Like that's great. They'd love to see the technology develop. But in the case with Hermias, we said, hey, what do you need that is like a real pain point that you have to have in the future? And how can we leverage DoD dollars to achieve that? Well, they're like, we need a radome. So I call Air Force AFRL and I said, hey, would you all be interested, or is there value for the Air Force to see a hypersonic radome developed? And they said, absolutely. Right. So you partner those two together and you align incentives, and then Atomic Six sits in the middle to make it happen. So if you can take that playbook and do it across all the projects and products that we're pursuing, you really drive that organic interest and development without spending a bunch of internal research and development dollars to get that out the door, which we are low budget. We try to be fiscally responsible, and I think matchmaking our potential customers with projects that the DoD wants to see fruitful, and really being that dual use sort of play has been the key to our revenue success so far, especially on the SBIR side.
Wow, that is a really smart approach. I think a lot of folks don't think that way, and yet a lot of times what they are looking for in the suburbs, right? They want to see that there's some commercial viability to the solution as well. And so, wow, I mean, makes a lot of sense. Go find that
Well,
commercial
and
demand.
Hermias, they saw that, and wisely they said, well, we were going to pay for this anyway. We'll throw 100 grand on top of the SBIR contract because we're going to get a 10-to-1 return on our money, right? So we got to do it anyway. Let's really lean into it. So I think if you can align incentives that way, it's a true win-win-win across DoD, us and our customers.
Yeah, and I think
Uh,
starting with knowing what the end looks like. So you know, if you're trying to serve the commercial market, go out and find those commercial customers that are interested first, and then figure out how we're going to get the R&D dollars to cover that. Because now you have actually a real market case for it, right? So, and if you find that, hey, I can't find any commercial customers, then you should pivot and go find, another business strategy that's going to work. Because at the end of the day, that's really where you want to be. Is you want that dual use capability. You got to start with commercial.
yeah, makes so much sense. Why didn't we all think of that, right? So, I want to I want to end with one last question, and I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on this, especially given the background that you have. And that is, if you could make one prediction about the future, what would it be?
All right, I'm going to think
Oh
about that.
man, yeah, I don't know. I think Starship is going to fly soon. I don't know, what the timeline's going to be, but I think it'll be successful, and I think that's going to have a big transformation within the industry that everyone is still trying to figure out what that's going to be, how that's going to play out.
For me, I look at where we are today in the space industry. I equate it to like when Columbus crossed the ocean blue. Right, he raised some money, VC money maybe, to get his boat, build it, and come across the ocean. But to really make that trip viable, there had to be an industrial base that supported that. And so I think we will see a real shift in interest, and it's headed that way. But when we can get industrialization utilizing the space environment, whether that's manufacturing pharmaceuticals in space or whatever it is, that really unlocks that key to commercialization in space. I think we will have multiple companies making money with space, not just tourism, but a real viable commercial opportunity before the end of the 2020s. So that's my prediction, and I hope to spend a weekend on the moon with my son at some point on a hotel.
Oh, okay. I can't wait for all of those things to come to pass. So if somebody wants to learn more about Atomic Six, what should they do?
Our website, www.atomic-6.com. I live on LinkedIn. If you haven't noticed, we're always on LinkedIn posting updates, so you can message us there. And then info at atomic-6.com, just for an email address.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being here today. It was a fascinating interview. I feel like we barely got a chance to scratch the surface. So hopefully you will join us again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lisa.
Absolutely. And I do want to thank GuideForce for hosting these sessions. To learn more about GuideForce, visit guideforce.com. And we'll see you next time on the Startup Leaders Show.